What if I told you the man who revolutionised your vacuum cleaner owns more British farmland than the Queen did, and he's using it to reshape the future of agriculture while making millions? James Dyson isn't just an inventor anymore. He's become Britain's biggest farmer, and what he's doing on his land will shock you. While everyone was watching Dyson invent bladeless fans and hairdryers, he was quietly buying up British farmland at an astonishing rate. Between 2013 and 2021, Dyson acquired over 36,000 acres across Lincolnshire, Oxfordshire and Gloucestershire. That's roughly 56 square miles of prime English countryside. He did it so quietly that most people had no idea until journalists started adding up the land registry records. By the time anyone noticed, Dyson had become Britain's largest private landowner after the aristocracy, owning more farmland than some historical estates that have been in families for centuries. The purchases weren't random. Dyson specifically targeted flat, fertile arable land in eastern England, the kind that produces the wheat, barley, and oilseed rape that feeds the nation. He paid top prices, sometimes 20% above market value, which annoyed local farmers who couldn't compete. But Dyson wasn't buying land as a hobby or a tax dodge. He had a plan that would transform these thousands of acres into one of the most technologically advanced farming operations in Europe, proving that British agriculture could be world-leading if someone was willing to invest properly in it. Dyson's main farming base is a 3,000-acre estate near Nocton in Lincolnshire, and it doesn't look like any farm you've ever seen. The headquarters building could be mistaken for a Silicon Valley office, all glass and steel and modern architecture, completely at odds with the traditional brick farmhouses that dot the English countryside. Inside, there are engineers working alongside agronomists, computer screens showing real-time data from every field, and meeting rooms where farming strategy is discussed with the same intensity as product development at Dyson's technology companies. This isn't a gentleman farmer's country retreat. It's the nerve centre of an industrial-scale farming operation that produces tens of thousands of tons of crops annually. The contrast between the ultra-modern facilities and the ancient land they sit on is deliberate. Dyson's making a statement that British farming needs to stop being nostalgic and romantic and start being efficient and profitable. The old guard in British agriculture hated it initially, seeing it as an outsider coming in with too much money and no respect for tradition. But as Dyson's yields started exceeding theirs year after year, the criticism became harder to sustain. Walk onto a Dyson farm during harvest, and you'll see equipment that most British farmers can only dream of owning. His combine harvesters cost £500,000 each, fitted with GPS guidance systems accurate to 2 centimetres, automated headers that adjust to crop conditions in real time, and yield monitoring that maps productivity for every square metre of every field. The tractors are equally impressive, £300,000 machines with air-conditioned cabs full of computer screens, capable of ploughing perfectly straight lines without a driver touching the steering wheel. Dyson owns dozens of these machines, representing an investment of tens of millions of pounds in equipment alone. Most British farmers make do with second-hand tractors and older combines because new machinery is prohibitively expensive. But Dyson calculated that the efficiency gains from top-spec equipment would pay for themselves within a few years through reduced labour costs, better fuel efficiency, and higher yields. He was right. His cost per tonne of wheat produced is among the lowest in Britain despite having the highest equipment costs, because the machinery allows him to farm with a fraction of the staff traditional operations require, and to optimise every aspect of cultivation and harvest. Much of the Lincolnshire land Dyson bought was heavy clay soil that flooded regularly, limiting what could be grown and when. Within months of purchase, Dyson initiated a massive drainage improvement project, installing kilometres of underground pipes and creating new ditches to move water off the fields faster. The project cost millions and required permission from environmental authorities, which Dyson obtained despite objections from some conservation groups who worried about impacts on local wetlands and wildlife habitats. The drainage transformed the land's productivity. Fields that used to be too waterlogged to plant in spring were suddenly workable weeks earlier, extending the growing season and allowing Dyson to grow crops that previously weren't viable in that location. Yields increased by 30 to 40% on the improved land within 2 years. Critics accused him of prioritising profit over environmental concerns, but Dyson argued that making British land more productive was essential for food security, and that modern drainage systems, properly designed, actually improve water quality by filtering runoff through controlled channels rather than letting it sheet across fields, picking up fertiliser and pesticides. Traditional British crop rotation meant growing wheat one year, barley the next, perhaps oilseed rape the third, then back to wheat. It's what farmers had done for generations because it maintains soil health and breaks pest and disease cycles. Dyson looked at this system and decided it was inefficient. His agronomists developed rotations based on soil analysis, market prices, and predictive modelling of disease pressure, sometimes growing wheat 3 years running on the same field, if the data suggested it would be profitable, other times switching crops annually. This flexible, data-driven approach was heresy to traditional farmers, but it worked. By responding to market conditions rather than following fixed rotations, Dyson maximised returns from every acre. When wheat prices spiked, he grew more wheat. When oilseed rape became unprofitable due to pest pressures, he switched to alternative break crops like beans or linseed. The strategy required sophisticated soil management, heavy fertiliser and pesticide use in some cases, but it proved that British farming could be far more responsive and profitable than the traditional approach allowed. Whether it's sustainable long-term remains contentious, but there's no arguing with the profitability figures. Traditional English estates employed dozens of farm workers who lived in tied cottages on the land, their families part of the rural community for generations. When Dyson took over, that model disappeared almost overnight. He needed fewer workers because of the high-tech machinery, and the workers he did need were specialists, agronomists, machinery operators, data analysts, not traditional farmhands. The tied cottages were sold off or rented at market rates to outsiders. Long-serving farm staff who'd expected to work the land until retirement found themselves redundant, their cottages no longer available. It was brutal, and it made Dyson deeply unpopular in rural Lincolnshire. Village shops lost customers, local schools lost pupils, the fabric of rural communities was torn apart. But from a business perspective, it was necessary. Modern farming doesn't need 20 men with pitchforks. It needs 3 people who can operate and maintain complex machinery and interpret agronomic data. Dyson was simply accelerating a change that was happening across British agriculture anyway. The countryside was emptying, farming was mechanising, and the romantic vision of rural life was giving way to industrial efficiency. He just did it faster and more completely than most. If this look inside Britain's most controversial farming empire is fascinating you, hit that like button and subscribe. We're just getting to the really interesting bits. Drop a comment and tell me, is Dyson saving British farming or destroying it? I want to hear what you think, especially if you're from farming country and have seen these changes firsthand. In 2018, Dyson announced that his entire Gloucestershire estate, over 2,000 acres, would convert to organic farming. This stunned everyone who'd been watching his industrial-scale, technology-first approach in Lincolnshire. Organic farming meant no synthetic fertilisers, no pesticides, lower yields, and significantly reduced profits per acre. It seemed to contradict everything Dyson's farming operation stood for, but he'd identified a market opportunity. Demand for British organic produce was growing faster than supply, and prices commanded a premium that could offset the lower yields. The conversion took 3 years. You can't just declare a field organic, you have to prove you've farmed it without chemicals for a full cycle. During that transition period, Dyson essentially farmed the Gloucestershire land at a loss, unable to call it organic yet, but unable to use the chemicals that would have made it profitable. Once certified though, the gamble paid off. His organic wheat sells for nearly double the price of conventional, and there are buyers queuing up for it. Dyson proved that even organic farming could be profitable at scale if you approached it as a business rather than an ideology, using technology and data to maximise returns within organic constraints. In 2020, Dyson planted over 200 hectares of woodland across his estates. That's nearly 500 acres of new forest. Not the dense coniferous blocks that commercial forestry companies plant, but mixed native woodland with oak, ash, beech and hazel. It seemed like an odd move for someone focused on agricultural productivity until you understood the economics. The government was offering grants for woodland creation as part of climate policy, and Dyson qualified for substantial payments. More importantly, woodland increases land value and provides long-term timber income while generating carbon credits that have real monetary value. The forestry investment shows Dyson thinking in decades, not years. The trees he's planting won't reach maturity for 50 years or more, long after he'll be gone, but they'll create an asset that appreciates steadily, requires minimal labour, and generates multiple income streams: timber, carbon credits, shooting rights, potentially even tourism. It's estate planning disguised as environmentalism, and it's extraordinarily clever. Traditional farmers focused on annual crop cycles missed these long-term wealth-building opportunities, but Dyson approaches land ownership the way he approaches business, looking for every possible value stream and playing the longest possible game. Dyson's a major Conservative Party donor and a vocal Brexit supporter who moved his company headquarters to Singapore while arguing Britain should leave the EU. That hypocrisy didn't go unnoticed, but it gave him extraordinary political access. When farming subsidies were being redesigned post-Brexit, Dyson had meetings with DEFRA ministers and policy advisors. The new subsidy system emphasises environmental outcomes over production, basically paying farmers for public goods like biodiversity and carbon sequestration rather than just for growing food. Dyson's estates are perfectly positioned to benefit from this system. His forestry planting qualifies for environmental payments. His organic conversion attracts higher subsidy rates. Even his drainage projects can be framed as water management that benefits the wider catchment. Critics argue that the subsidy system was designed to benefit large landowners like Dyson rather than small family farms struggling to survive. Whether that's deliberate or coincidental, the fact remains that Dyson's farming operation receives hundreds of thousands of pounds annually in public subsidies while returning millions in profit, a situation that traditional farmers watching their own subsidy payments shrink find deeply frustrating. Dyson's purchased farmland includes dozens of old farm buildings, barns, grain stores, machinery sheds that are no longer needed for modern farming. Rather than letting them decay, he's systematically converting them into high-end residential properties. Lincolnshire planning authorities have approved conversions of multiple barn complexes into luxury homes worth £800,000 to £1.2 million each. It's a strategy that aristocratic estates have used for decades, but Dyson's doing it at industrial scale and speed. The conversions are controversial because they're changing the character of rural areas. Wealthy incomers buying converted barns while local young people can't afford housing. But from Dyson's perspective, it's simply making efficient use of redundant agricultural buildings while generating capital to reinvest in the farming operation. Each barn conversion brings in profit equivalent to years of farming the surrounding land, and once sold, the buildings require no further input from Dyson while the land continues producing crops. It's asset monetisation that most farmers simply don't have the capital or planning expertise to pursue, and it's made Dyson's land holdings far more valuable than traditional agricultural valuations would suggest. Dyson's flat Lincolnshire fields are perfect for wind turbines and solar panels, and he's exploited this systematically. His estates host multiple wind turbines generating electricity that's sold to the grid, plus solar panel arrays covering areas unsuitable for cropping. The renewable energy installations generate six-figure annual incomes that have nothing to do with farming, but everything to do with owning large areas of land in the right locations. He's essentially a renewable energy landlord who happens to grow wheat on the side. This diversification means Dyson's land generates income from multiple sources: crop sales, environmental subsidies, property development, and energy generation. Traditional farmers might have one wind turbine if they're lucky. Dyson has the scale to negotiate better rates with energy companies and the capital to invest in multiple installations. The renewable income smooths out the volatility of agricultural profits. When crop prices slump, the wind keeps blowing and the sun keeps shining. It's a model that shows how modern land ownership is about maximising every possible value stream, not just growing food, and it's made Dyson's farming empire far more resilient than operations dependent solely on agricultural income. One section of Dyson's Lincolnshire estate operates as a research and development farm, testing new crop varieties, farming techniques, and technologies before rolling them out across the broader operation. It's like having a full-scale laboratory where experiments involve hundreds of acres rather than small test plots. Dyson's partnered with agricultural technology companies and university researchers, providing them with real-world testing facilities in exchange for early access to innovations. The research farm has trialled everything from robotic weeders to drone crop monitoring to experimental wheat varieties bred for climate resilience. Successful innovations get implemented across all Dyson's land within months, giving him a competitive advantage over farmers who wait years for new technologies to become mainstream. The research operation also attracts government grants and creates valuable intellectual property. Some of the farming techniques developed and proven on Dyson's land are now being licensed to other agricultural operations. It's yet another income stream, and it positions Dyson as a thought leader in British agriculture, rather than just a wealthy outsider buying up land. When Dyson bought his Lincolnshire estates, he acquired something more valuable than the land itself: water extraction licenses, allowing him to pump millions of litres from underground aquifers for irrigation. In eastern England, where rainfall is limited and summer droughts increasingly common, irrigation is what separates good yields from great ones. Dyson's water rights, some granted decades ago when regulations were laxer, give him a massive advantage over neighbours who can't irrigate as extensively. The water licenses are controversial because they're essentially permanent rights granted to whoever owns the land, regardless of changing climate conditions or competing demands for water. Environmental groups argue that large-scale irrigation is unsustainable and harms local rivers and wetlands. Local residents worry about boreholes running dry. But Dyson's legally entitled to the water, and he uses it extensively, particularly for potato crops that command premium prices but require consistent moisture. The water rights alone probably add millions to the value of his estates, and they're a reminder that modern farming at scale is as much about controlling resources like water and drainage as it is about growing crops. Like many large English estates, Dyson's land hosts commercial shooting, pheasant and partridge shoots, where wealthy clients pay thousands of pounds per day. The shooting operation requires habitat management, hedgerows, cover crops, woodland edges, that happens to be excellent for biodiversity. It also employs gamekeepers and generates significant income during the shooting season from October to February, exactly when farming income is lowest. The shooting enterprise is structured as a separate business, but uses the farming infrastructure: barns for game processing, tracks for vehicle access, staff who work on both operations. Clients include corporate groups and overseas visitors paying premium prices for the English country estate experience. The income is substantial enough that Dyson maintains some land specifically for game cover rather than maximum crop production, because the shooting revenue exceeds what those acres would generate from farming. It's a traditional aristocratic revenue stream bolted onto a modern agricultural operation, and it works brilliantly. The shooting clients don't care that the estate is run like a technology company rather than a heritage property. They just want good sport and the cachet of shooting on a famous person's land. Dyson's in his 70s, and his farming empire is structured for multi-generational wealth preservation. The land is held through family trusts and corporate structures that minimise inheritance tax exposure, while ensuring it can't be easily divided or sold off piecemeal. His children are involved in the business, learning estate management and farming operations. This isn't a hobby that'll be sold when he's gone, it's being positioned as a dynasty. The structures Dyson's using are complex but legal, exploiting agricultural property relief and business property relief that can reduce inheritance tax on qualifying land and businesses to zero. It's exactly how aristocratic families have preserved their estates for centuries, adapted for modern tax law. Critics call it tax avoidance by the wealthy, but it's within the rules, and it ensures that the farming operation Dyson's built will continue generating income for his descendants rather than being broken up to pay death duties. The long-term thinking shows Dyson views the land as a family asset to be preserved and enhanced, not a business to be sold for maximum profit, which ironically aligns him with the traditional aristocratic values of land ownership he seemed to reject with his modernisation agenda. Dyson's farming headquarters in Lincolnshire isn't just managing farms, it's becoming a technology centre, attracting young graduates in data science, software engineering, and agricultural technology. These aren't traditional farming jobs, they're tech careers that happen to be agriculture-focused. The operation uses machine learning to optimise crop rotations, satellite imagery to assess field conditions, and predictive analytics to time fertiliser applications. It requires skills more commonly found in London tech companies than on farms. By positioning agriculture as a technology challenge, Dyson's attracting talent that would never have considered farming careers. The pay is competitive with urban tech jobs, the work is genuinely innovative, and staff get to live in relatively affordable rural areas rather than expensive cities. It's creating a new model for agricultural employment. Fewer low-skilled manual workers, more high-skilled knowledge workers. Whether this is good for rural communities depends on your perspective, but it's undeniably changing what farming careers look like and proving that agriculture can attract the brightest graduates if it's presented as cutting-edge rather than traditional. Dyson owns massive grain storage facilities across his estates, modern steel silos that can hold thousands of tons. Most farmers harvest their grain and sell immediately because they lack storage capacity, accepting whatever price the market offers. Dyson stores his grain and sells when prices are highest, sometimes months after harvest. The price difference can be 20 to 30%, and with tens of thousands of tons produced annually, that translates to millions in additional revenue. The storage facilities also generate income from neighbours who pay Dyson to store their grain in his silos. He's essentially become a grain merchant, as well as a producer, controlling both production and distribution. The storage infrastructure required millions in investment, but it's paid for itself many times over by allowing Dyson to play the grain markets rather than being a price taker. It's another example of how scale and capital create advantages unavailable to smaller operators. The ability to wait for better prices, to aggregate supplies, to control timing of sales. Traditional farmers watching grain prices rise after they've sold their harvest at lower prices know exactly how valuable Dyson's storage capacity is. Much of the premium wheat from Dyson's organic estate doesn't stay in Britain. It's exported to European buyers willing to pay top prices for certified British organic grain. Brexit made this more complicated with additional paperwork and border checks, but Dyson's scale means he can absorb those costs more easily than small producers. He's essentially arbitraging international price differences, sending grain wherever the best returns are available. The export focus has made Dyson less dependent on British grain buyers who might try to exploit their market position. If British millers won't pay his asking price, European ones will. This international orientation is unusual for British arable farming, which has traditionally been domestically focused, but it shows how Dyson approaches farming as a global business rather than a local enterprise. The connections and logistics infrastructure required for consistent international trade are beyond most British farmers' capabilities, but they're straightforward for someone who built a global technology company and understands international business operations. Climate change is making British weather more unpredictable. Wetter winters, drier summers, more extreme events. Dyson's response has been to build resilience into his farming operations, improve drainage for wet periods, irrigation capacity for dry spells, crop variety, diversification to spread risk, and insurance coverage that most farmers can't afford. He's essentially climate-proofing his agricultural investment, while others are hoping conditions don't deteriorate too badly. The climate hedge extends to crop choices. planting more spring crops that avoid winter waterlogging, trialling drought-resistant varieties, adjusting planting dates based on long-range weather forecasting. It's risk management applied to farming, with the same rigor Dyson applied to product development. Recognising that British agriculture faces growing climate volatility and building systems to cope with it. Traditional farmers often can't afford this level of adaptation. They're farming year to year and hoping for decent weather. Dyson's planning for a climate change future and positioning his estate to remain productive regardless of how conditions shift. James Dyson's farming empire spans over 36,000 acres, employs hundreds of people, generates tens of millions in revenue from multiple income streams, and has fundamentally challenged how British agriculture operates. He's proved that farming can be profitable if approached as a serious business with proper investment, technology, and strategic thinking. He's also shown that land ownership in modern Britain is about far more than growing crops. It's about exploiting every possible value from property, resources, and assets while building multi-generational wealth structures. Whether Dyson's model is good for British farming is genuinely debatable. He's created efficiency and profitability, but at the cost of rural employment and community. He's invested in environmental improvements while benefiting from subsidy systems that favour large landowners. He's brought innovation and technology while displacing traditional farming families. What's undeniable is that he's changed the conversation about what British farming can be. Love him or loathe him, and rural Britain is deeply divided on James Dyson. His farming empire shows that British agriculture's future will belong to those willing to invest, innovate, and think beyond the traditional farm gate. James Dyson built a £500 million farming empire spanning 36,000 acres that's revolutionising British agriculture through technology, diversification, and ruthless efficiency. From vacuum cleaners to wheat fields, this is how one man's business mind transformed rural Britain. Hit subscribe and watch the next video on your screen to see another fascinating empire.